Welcome to the inaugural edition of Let's Drink Bourbon, the podcast. That's Wes Henderson. He founded Angel's Envy. I'm Tim Young. I just buy a lot of bourbon. And our special guest today is the creator of American Highway Reserve. And his list of accomplishments is so long that I started to write them down and I just
You don't need to even say them.
I was going to say any of them. There's so much stuff. Man, when you do a radio interview normally, does it take them like half the interview's got to be reading off your accomplishments, right? You got 5 minutes.
Well, no, what I find is they read like the weirdest ones. Like they'll pick like, you know, the whatever, the like guitar player, you know, best solo winner of 2008. No, I don't know. No need to even say any of that. I'm here because just like you, I buy a lot of bourbon.
I mean, it's crazy. How big is your collection? I'd imagine you have a pretty fun one.
Yeah, it's great because Wes has been here. That's where this all began, was years ago here in this very house downstairs. I should have done this from there. It's a great little, what was a porch, you know, it was a big porch, it was enclosed. I said, what if and it was technically like built onto the front of the house. So it sort of had its own climate, you know, it had a front door and windows and everything still. So I was like, we could ventilate this for cigar smoking. We could put shelves up here and a bar, and next thing you know, I had my contractor doing this thing, and this project became amazing. It's all maple. The next thing I know, there's boards of maple stacked 5 feet tall in front of it in the front yard, and he hand saws everything in there. And then it became just a fun thing to do on the road, is go looking for unicorns and collecting, and you know, and then becoming good friends with guys like Wes that shower you with gifts. I mean, I get most of the, like I tried the sherry cask years before that ever came out, you know.
That's
and
right.
and had some bottles of that. I told him how much I liked it, and next thing you know, there's these little sample bottles that come in the mail look like medicine. It's like we're back in Prohibition days. It's a lot of fun though. It's what a hobby to collect. As I see behind you, you've got a problem.
I have a little bit of a problem, just a little bit. And I moved the product forward. I've learned actually, even though this is the first episode that we're putting out, I've learned that to not mention certain brands that I enjoy sometimes, because sometimes Wes knows things about things that I don't. And I pulled something out and he goes, oh, not that one. And I'm like, all right, well, only Angel's Envy from now on. Forget anything behind.
I find that a lot with friends in the business too, where you'll say something and one thing I find compared to the music business, and Wes, I think, will corroborate this, is that just like there was a show I did there was one in Tampa, but there was one in Cincinnati where it was you, Brett Elliott, and also Trey Zoller. So we had Jefferson's, Angel's Envy, and Four Roses, the Master Distillers, all backstage, and they get along so well. I think this industry is one. It's not like the music business. I can't say that other artists are as happy for you when you have a product that people devour in our town. I mean, they are, but there's a bless your heart aspect to it. And I think in the bourbon world, there's just so much demand for all of it. It isn't like, I mean, you know how it is. Looking behind you, when you buy a Michter's, it doesn't mean you didn't buy the Weller I see. You know what I mean? It's like you want them all. And I don't think that the competition is such that you have any sort of envy, for lack of a better word, right?
Well, and those are some of the funnest times I have, is with my fellow distillers or industry partners or whatever. And I vividly remember that night after sitting along the Ohio River after the show,
bonfire.
all of us sitting there in River Bend's a beautiful venue.
Yeah.
And you know, to enjoy good music and then to sit down and we're all just passing around each other's stuff.
Yeah. It was unbelievable. As you can imagine, everybody brought like little things off the shelf you can't get. And there's nothing more fun, I think. And that's one reason I absolutely love having a foot in this business a little bit, because I think music and this goes so hand in hand in the experience. And I think music is better with bourbon, and I think bourbon is better with music, you know?
Do you personally show up to liquor stores and go hide out
Yeah.
in the middle of nowhere to look for stuff?
Oh, every city that anytime we're in a place where I know there's something worth going to. Unfortunately, there's some states where they don't have a very good where it's all sort of a ABC store, like it's the only store that they'll allow in a town is a state run, and it doesn't typically have things. But we've learned which places are worth going to. And oh yeah, I've got my places in the most obscure cities that you wouldn't believe, where it's like we've done it for so long now, where we're like, hey, remember that whiskey shop's in just 5 minutes from the venue. It's like, oh yeah, we got to go there. So I'll make sure we go. And I go myself because I know what I want, and I know what I'm looking for if there's something on the shelf that I don't have.
I just think it's fun to think that myself and other people are in competition with Brad Paisley to get to the small towns to get these to get unicorn bottles. That's kind of fun.
That's the way of things these days, isn't it?
Yep.
Barrett, it's been interesting watching kind of your journey as you developed more, collected more, and tasted more and developed more. Has that been fun for you just to grow in that appreciation and
Absolutely. Well, the pandemic didn't help. When you got a full bar and nobody came over for a while, it was like, well, I guess I got to try that one.
It's when you say, Kim, here, help. I need some help.
I remember the World Series, my team's the Dodgers, and that was the pandemic World Series with the Dodgers, just sitting in the bar with my dad. Him and I were in the bar with the World Series games on, just him and I. I mean, I'll never forget it. And so it's been, I think nothing prepares you and tells you more about this product and educates you more than having options. And you've got to do the flights. It's just like you're saying, Wes, that night on the bank of the Ohio River, me and you and those other two distillers, cigars, whiskey, Dixie cups with things you brought, with things they brought, sitting around talking. I mean, the memory of that is tainted because as so much goes into the experience. There's a campfire, there's all of it. There's a concert you just had, there's friends nearby. And so really objectively tasting whiskey, I think, comes down to having a lab like you have right behind you there, Tim. Like you got this, you can sit down and you can do a little bit of the various, Parker's Heritage stuff. You can say, okay, this one and this one and this one are my favorite, or that one, or I don't like that, or I do like that. And that scientific, ooh, look at that.
This is the one. Now, look, this is the fun thing, right? So everyone right now, I've been doing this with my friends. I bring my friends over. And Benchmark has started. Benchmark, you don't think it's a high end, it's a bottom shelf. And all of a sudden they start coming out with 5 different types. And you got to get them all. They're like, $20 a piece. And the only way you know the difference or what to do is if you're trying them next to each other.
$100 later, you have an experience. Yeah.
With a large group of people.
Group. And it didn't break the bank.
Nope.
And I think that's exactly right. And you learn what you like doing that. People that come over to the bar, it's always fun when I say, do you like bourbon? They're like, yeah, I think so. I like Jack Daniels. And it's like, okay, sit down. And then you give them you run the gamut, and I'll give them sort of things they cannot get anywhere else. And it's a lot of fun to watch them start to see the small nuances in it. And so much of it is the experience,
It is. The other thing I like and something that I share with people all the time. I mean, I do have, of course, a shelf of Weller back here. It's fun to have the shelf back there of everything, of course. But when people are so out, like trying to hunt that, I'm like, now hold on. Instead of that, when you can't find it, I mean, this is just as good.
Maker's 46 is, I've heard that's what Julian drinks when he can't get Pappy, when he runs out.
I could imagine. I mean, if you're going weeded and understanding what's in a mash bill. I mean, when you get to that level of geek and fandom of bourbon, that you understand the mash bill, what goes into it, and the different aging process, you're like, wait a second, that matches up with that, and that's $80 cheaper than that. So, like,
Oh, at least $80, and it's like, it depends on which one.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, you can walk in those stores too, and they're like, I see a bunch of red wax back there. You've probably got what I've got, where I'll walk in and they'll say, this is our barrel of Makers. And it's like, and it's got these staves and this toast char and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, I'll buy it. It's usually $40 or something, even for that. And the next thing you know, you got something else to try.
That's the magic, is when you start talking to a liquor store owner or a clerk that helps pick it out, and they have a little bit of a passion for bourbon. I don't even hesitate. I'm like, give me that barrel pick. If you help pick that out, I want to try that. And that's where really so much is happening. I mean, this is what I'm really excited about with these guys, to kiss Wes's butt once in a while here. The fact that there are barrel picks of Angel's Envy floating around now that you can get regularly, and you couldn't used to get these. These are
amazing.
Yeah,
I bet they are. Well, I'm expecting a few of those next time you drive south.
Absolutely.
I want your hand-picked ones, Wes.
I got that. I've also got an ice cider set aside for you too. So,
oh boy,
I know. Now,
you're always welcome. We will never close the gate on the farm for you.
Now, the last bottle I smuggled over to you, and I don't know if you had a chance to open it or not, was a Mizunara.
Yep,
the Mizunara finish.
It's halfway gone at least.
Oh, that's great.
I've done that in a bunch of flights lately, where it's like that and a Pappy and a Four Roses barrel select, and just as an example of like, I'll do that when I have like a friend in town that I want to say, these are things you can't get. You just can't get them. They're all thousands of bucks aftermarket. You got to try them while you're here, because you just can't get them. So yeah, I'm halfway done with that.
That's great. I love to hear that.
And it's great. It's got a very unique thing to it.
The Japanese oak is so complex, and it takes so long. We actually have some bourbon in some new fill in Japanese. Now the Mizunara finish that you have is a finish. We also are aging some bourbon in virgin Mizunara barrels, which will be kind of an interesting experiment. But
will it still be allowed to be called bourbon?
It will be. It's because it's in oak. It's in a new chartered oak container. And that's a really good, that's when we decided to do it. I wanted to be able to have that conversation.
I bet you had to look that up. I'm sure it was a matter of like, what's Congress say about this?
Well, intuitively we knew it, but you're right. I mean, we didn't want to be wrong about it, but we didn't want to be wrong about it.
Well, it's about the only beverage in America they passed a resolution declaring what it has to be.
That's it. And we have to protect it. We really do, just like the Mexico protects tequila, and more you see it more with the Scots and Scotch, with their regulations. And but I think one of the nice things about bourbon though is we have those regulations, but we're not so restrictive that we can't experiment with finishes and mash bills and other things like that.
No, that's what I like about it too. That's what we did with ours is the finishing process. But that's how you differentiate something that, especially too, when you don't have 20 years, 16, 17 years to get a product out. It's like, what makes this? And that's to me the genius of Angel's Envy, where you go and the recipe with the port barrels and how you turn that into something that's so consistent that every single person likes that I've ever met. If you don't like Angel's Envy, you don't like bourbon, honestly, at all. Then it is not for you. You'll never like anything.
We'll give you some vodka. We'll give you some Tito's.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. There's anything wrong with it.
No, I know, but it's like you go, to me, that's the one that there's a couple of them when I got somebody that says they don't like bourbon in the bar. I'll start with Angel's Envy just to see, because usually they'll say, no, I like that. What is that? Or there's a couple go-tos. It's like Angel's Envy and Ocean. Jefferson's Ocean's another one where it's like there's just no edge to it for somebody who's a newbie. There's nothing that turns you off, and it's a brilliant. And it's something about the way you do the port finish that just takes the edges off of whatever it is that people don't like. It's like some people don't like. There are people also, like, the one thing I've noticed is rye. There are people that maybe have the wrong, it's sort of like Brussels sprouts for some people. I don't know. It'll never work for some people, but I love it. Well,
that's a good example. Another great example of finishing. You can take a rye
Yep.
that people may not normally like, and finish it in a barrel and
Well, like
influence
you
it that
did.
way.
Greatest rye ever made. That's the greatest rye ever made right there. No one will ever beat. My wife could drink that for breakfast, and maybe has.
Good. I like to hear that.
This is
As
actually,
you know,
this is the whiskey that I get women in on, by the way. This is
right?
someone who still dates. I'm like, you want to try something that you'll love?
I'm telling you, you could splash that on your neck and it's perfume. It just is that aromatic. It's unbelievable.
Yep. Let me ask you this real quick. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Wes.
Well, we talked about secondary barrel finishes, and I want to start and hold that thought. I want to start getting in a little bit more into American Highway, and Brad, you and I have talked a lot over the years about certainly music and bourbon and craftsmanship and wood, and we've even talked about how guitars age over time, and how, you know, bourbon, all those parallels, and in putting together American Highway, I know that you had a lot of those things in mind. Is that
well,
right?
Yeah, I think what really occurred to me when we did it was the experience of going to a concert and what music does to you, the sound waves, the experience, the travel. There's a lot of travel involved with a concert. No one has a concert in their house typically. It's, you got to go somewhere, and most people go to another city, or at least, you know, a 30-minute drive away. And in the case of what we were doing, when you look at the folklore of how bourbon even began, which, you know, the legend is, goes to a wedding in New Orleans as moonshine, comes out of the barrels as bourbon. They call back and go, or not call, but they write letters back saying, we want more of that brown liquid. And it's like, what are you talking about? It was clear when it left. That idea of going down a river and taking a voyage, and going and turning into what it was, you know, if that's the truth of how this thing began, where they put it in barrels, the next thing you know, it ages different and becomes better. You know, the idea was, okay, what does the highway do to it? My first idea was, let's stick a barrel. It was the dumbest thing in the world. Let's stick a barrel in the bay of the bus and just let it go on tour with us. And several, my firefighter father included, people said, this is dumb and illegal. And you can't. And, you know, you're taking a bomb on your bus. It's like, oh yeah, you're right, that doesn't work. And then we went through the process of dotting the I's and crossing the T's of how you legally can transport 90 barrels of bourbon down a highway and back. And that legal process was extensive. But in a nutshell, what has to happen is you have to like sign it, you have to bond it. You have to basically say, we're not going to open these. We're not going to open this truck till it's back, you know, under supervision. So you padlock it. And that truck, when it's going down the highway, if you get close enough, you can tell there's bourbon in it, because it will, I mean, it smells like a rick house, and you know what those smell like. And so we sent it, the first batch we did, which was last year, we sent down the road the whole 2019 tour, and then the pandemic hit. And we had to then, through the course of the pandemic, blend it on Zoom as opposed to in person. So we did that, came up with a blend we liked of the first batch that went down the highway. And I think it was 3 or 4 year old bourbon that went down the highway. And then we blended that. The second batch was a little older and a lot more drinkable out of the barrel. I got to try it before it went down the highway. And we also we have some really interesting pieces in the second, and what we call Route 2, which has a little different logo and an actual Route 2 logo on it, like a highway sign. And Route 2 to me just took a quantum leap in terms of taste profile. There's a couple of things about it. It was older going in the barrel. It was, or going on the road. As soon as we loaded in the truck, it was at least 4, maybe 5, 6 years old. And then the other thing is, we've got some 13, some 15, and we also have a Georgia bourbon that's blended in to this. And that's a pretty remarkable thing. And one of the things I realized about this brand is that there's a lot of potential for this interstate sort of blending that we're not tied to, like, we had to actually change the seal. The seal on American Highway, the first batch said distilled in Kentucky, aged across America. The second one, we had to say made in Kentucky, because it was partially distilled in Kentucky, but some was distilled in Georgia. And I tasted that Georgia bourbon before it went in, and I couldn't believe it. This little distillery down there blew my mind. And so that's part of the profile of the second one. But that's what's fun about the product, is just like any trip you take or anywhere that you go, that trip changes you. Travel will change you quicker. That's what Mark Twain always said, is that it's fatal to prejudice. But it's like that travel, that weathering, and that, that richness that comes from experience. I think bourbon does the same thing as a human being when it goes on a journey.
Isn't it fun though to be, and I think it's genius, the picking up the Georgia bourbon or Georgia whiskey, for example. And you could, in your travels, when you're going to look at different liquor stores, you can visit some of these little distilleries and say, oh, wow.
Say, hey, you want to go down the road with us? Right.
Yeah, exactly. And
well, there's also so much that can be said about like the destination of it. Like we got its picture in front of all these highway city limit signs. Like if it went into Seattle, there it is. If it went, and it did, that first batch went everywhere. I mean, we got stuck, unable to, like, we went out on the road, did a whole year, and then it sat in the truck. Like, we didn't know, it aged for a while sitting in a parking lot until we got it out. The second batch did its own thing, and there's never going to be two alike. The other thing you can do is, it doesn't always have to be my shows. It doesn't have to go to my stuff. It can go to anybody, any other singer's thing. It can be rock show. What does rock music do to it? Yeah. What happens if it hits the baseball stadiums? What if we do a baseball version or a football stadium version where it goes to all 16, or not 16, I guess it'd be 30. But yeah, you go half or all the football stadiums in the course of a season. So it's a lot of fun to think about. And then, like you say, like there's one thing we're working on right now with a West Virginia component, which just makes a lot of sense for me. There's some things bubbling in West Virginia that are pretty cool in the bourbon front. It's about time. I mean, we've been way ahead on moonshine since 1922. So it's time to get in the bourbon business in my state. So a lot of these things are fun to think about where it could go.
Yeah, it's wild. I got to tell you, like, similarly, as I just said earlier, when I was talking about grabbing a barrel pick automatically because of a store clerk who's kind of into it, man, yeah. Like knowing that you are so knowledgeable and have your collection and understand how things work, I can't imagine this juice is any bad, and any way that it's bad. It's got to be great.
I love it so far. That's interesting. Like, each one has its own profile. The first one has a really high rye content, which I like. It's probably too spicy for some people, but the nose is ridiculous because of that. I mean, there's that thing rye does to the nose that's just caramel. And then the second batch is way smoother, but has some similarities. And I don't know, honestly, what a trip down the highway does to it. I know what it's like to ride in the back of a semi-tractor trailer truck, though, and it's brutal. So it's doing something. I mean, and especially this time of year, like we've done Phoenix in August with this last year or 2 years ago. Maybe it was last year when we did Phoenix in August, and that truck was sitting in that parking lot and it was 114. So who says, I don't know. I don't know what.
I don't think we don't really have science on a lot of it, but the basic science though is that, you've got fluid in a barrel that's being agitated. So yeah, that's going to have some effect. You have these, in some cases, extreme differences in temperature, and being in the back of a semi truck, especially in hot weather, you're going to get an enhanced maturation. You're going to get temperatures much higher than you're going to get in a normal rick house. And Dad and I have experimented with a lot of that, and I'll have to share some of that with you one of these days.
I'd love to know that. Yeah,
and maybe we can put some probes in some of those barrels and watch some of those fluctuations, and you can really see what a difference that makes.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
totally.
yeah, I think that would be fun. And
I think so too. And I think that in the case of like all of these things, it's about adding something that no one's done. And that's where the bourbon field is it's a wide open blank canvas right now in some ways, in ways that it wasn't, because there are certainly purists in the world that say you shouldn't do certain things to it, that bourbon is meant to be. And but the thing I've said to that over the years and is that it's like, well, those exist. We have bourbons that are matured and as time preserved examples of how it's done and been done since the 1800s or earlier. And so it's like, now what can we do? There's room. I think there's room for a lot of things that are fun, just like you putting it in the Japanese oak. It's like, I want to taste that. I want to know what that's like.
there's fewer and fewer people now. When we first started finishing Angel's Envy, we heard a lot of noise, a lot of background noise about whether it's bourbon. And, my answer was, well, it's not just bourbon, it's bourbon finished in, it's something more. But I hear less and less now noise. As a matter of fact, the market expects some of those innovations now, and they appreciate it as long as you honor the history of bourbon. It gives you license to play around with it. I assume
I totally agree. And I know one thing. As soon as I met you years ago now, and I started hearing about Angel's Envy when I would go in the liquor stores. I had just built the bar, and they're like, "Oh, you got to get this." Got it. And of course, I was immediately hooked. Had to meet you and had to be your friend as quick as I could. And it's like anything. As soon as word was sort of spreading, I saw more and more finished in rum barrel, finished in port barrel, you saw companies jumping on board that you never would have imagined would have done that. And it just seemed like, everything from Woodford to, next thing you know, there's barrel finished products out there. And it didn't mean those companies trashed their standard bourbons. It just meant I needed to get that too from them. You know what I mean? But I do think you led the way in that way, in a way, especially in the rye front. When you think about, like, again, just like you were saying, Tim, it's like Jiminy Christmas. It's like, I've never seen anybody not take one sip of the Angel's Envy rye with an ice cube in it and not be like, yeah, give me some more of that immediately.
Yeah. And my thing too, to what you were saying earlier there, Brad, when somebody comes out with like a different like finish and whatnot, I buy it all immediately. I like buy the whole rack immediately. So when Old Forester came out with their 4 different age, what was it? The 1870, 1890, 1897, 1910, 1920. It's like, I want to buy them all right away. I want to see what they've done. I want to see what the difference is on these products. Rye, people are finally, I think, waking up to and doing different things with, but it all started, I think it all started with Wes and Angel's Envy rye because of how different it is and what he could do.
Oh, I've seen a lot of people try to. I've seen some brands recently that are rye finished in rum cask. None of them have what you have. I don't know what you got going. I don't know what illegal substance is in that, but keep it up.
Thank you.
Catnip. You got catnip in it. Something.
Hey, how did you discover that Georgia distillery? And do you have a couple of favorite small distilleries right now that you will always drop in when you're in town?
Yeah, there's the Georgia thing came about because of a couple of my partners in this said, hey, you got to check this out. And it was a really wonderful profile to add in a small quantity to what we were doing. It just brought out something. As far as distilleries go, I'm trying to think of small ones. I don't necessarily get to see small distilleries all that often. I've been sent some stuff that's really interesting. What's the one up in New York that your dad had something to do with?
Oh, Catskill Distilling.
Yeah. What is it that they make?
They've got it's got a righteous bourbon and some
that's really interesting. There's one that looks like it comes in a medicinal bottle. They got a little logo that's New York as well. some of those are really interesting. You know what, there's a great store out in Santa Barbara where we spend a lot of time, that has a lot of these little unicorns. The guy that runs it is a huge aficionado. And sometimes that's the trick in any of these small stores. You walk in, if the guy behind the counter really cares, and he's going to have these things you can't find. That's where I discovered half the things I've got in my bar over the years. I mean, it was like, I would walk in, I would read on the Distiller app, which is a great app on your phone. You guys probably have it. It's called Distiller, and you can type in something and it'll tell you the rating. And, you know, you take that with a grain of salt, but it's an interesting way to see what's coming out. It keeps you updated. And I would read about something like a new Parker's Heritage. I remember walking in, I remember reading about Promise of Hope, the one they did that was going to benefit ALS, and saw a massively glowing review about it. So I went in, and he had like 8 bottles of Promise of Hope for $80. I bought them all. I have them all.
That's what you have to do, though. I mean, I do the same thing. Look, when you see a glowing review of something and you know you're never going to see it again, you gotta get it. I mean,
it's a matter of time.
I lost my mind the other day. So I was told when I was in Louisville taping a couple of these earlier episodes with Wes, this is called Iron Root Republic, and they're based in Denison, Texas. These guys were trained in cognac, and they started.
Oh, okay.
And Denison is actually a sister city to a couple of cities in France. And so the master distillers from cognacs will come over and play around with their stuff with them. And I went up, it's 90 minutes from where I live. I had no idea until I was in Louisville and somebody told me about it. I show up to this place. It's just me and the master distiller hanging out. Nobody else is there on a weekday. And I lost my mind. And this is some of the best juice I've ever had from this tiny little distillery. It's been around 6 years in Denison, Texas, Iron Root Republic.
So you live in Texas, or are you up in Kentucky?
I'm in Texas. I live in Grapevine, right next to the airport.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So
great.
It's and I think I probably need to up my insurance on my my little house here, because it's a little crazy behind me.
I'll say.
Brad, how's you're getting ready to go to just kind of switching gears away from bourbon for a minute. You're getting ready to travel, I guess, to the UK and to that part of the world soon here.
Doing Glasgow, which, you know, I'm going to come back with some stuff from there. Yeah, we've got a whole European tour. It's Glasgow and Dublin, which, again, there's some things you can get there. Although I'm a bigger fan of the beer in Dublin than I am Irish whiskey. There's some Irish whiskeys I like, all right, but then Sweden, Norway, Germany, Copenhagen, I think. Anyway, can't keep track. We're about to be gone a couple of weeks.
Well, I know you in the past have timed St. Patrick's Day, right? to
were
be
you,
somewhere
were you
near
that
Guinness.
Year I did that.
Yeah, well, I didn't make it back to your house when you brought it back, but I mean, that was a special trip, wasn't it? I mean, you know, nothing better than Guinness straight from the factory.
We flew kegs of Guinness from Ireland. They had to figure out how. We had to figure out how to do it. And the trick was they had to gift it to me. I couldn't buy it and bring it back. It was totally illegal to do that. But as a gift, I could bring it back. So we flew it back on the 16th of March and tapped it on the 17th on St. Patrick's Day. And it was, according to the guys at Guinness, they had taken it right off the line, brought it to the airport. So as soon as we did that, we were serving Guinness, they said, that was about 2 weeks newer than anything in Dublin at my bar on St. Patrick's Day.
That's awesome. That's wild.
It was wild. And you'll never have it again like that. I mean, it's like, because I'd heard the wives' tale that, oh, there's a bunch of rich people have it sent over from Ireland. It's like, no, they can't. They legally can't do that. We never do that. They said we had to try to figure. It was like the first time they know of that they've done that. So it was really wild to invite 100 people over and just say, here we go, let's try it. And they got to have Guinness like they were over there. And it is different. It's way different.
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
I think this is the longest you've probably ever been in an interview without anybody asking you about music. So I'm going to break that now. It's been 40 minutes.
You don't have to. That's okay. It's been very refreshing.
I'll ask one question only, because it's one of my favorite songs. It's been a playlist for years. When you wrote Alcohol, like, did you know right away how cool that song was?
Not necessarily. I thought, it's nice of you to say that. I thought it was clever and I really liked what I was saying, but the first time we cut it, there was a magic missing. And the magic was actually alcohol itself, because I cut it as a ballad first try. I went in and it was like, it sounded like almost, it was more of like a Loudon Wainwright or a folk song or something. Well, the way I cut it, it was sort of real acoustic, real slow waltz. I can make anybody pretty, can make you believe any lie. And it sounded like almost a riddle or a limerick,
Mhm.
and it was just a nice little, like, weird, quirky album cut. And then I don't know if it was my producer or me that said, there's something missing off of this. What if we rock it up and make it into a party? This thing should feel like, woo, that's right, I'm going to make a fool of myself tonight. And we did. And we brought the band back in and gave them all several beers and said, once you've had a couple of beers, we'll go with this and it'll be time to hit record. And they had a few beers, got real loose. Then it was the one you've heard, and it came to life, and it really brought the point home. And it's funny because it becomes this just party, like what happens on any given frat party Friday night. I mean, you start out thinking this is going to be a blast, and you wake up wondering what you did. And yeah, so I'm glad. I did not know at first. It wasn't until I heard the cut that captured the whole thing. The whole vibe of what I was going for, that I was able to sort of understand. Oh, I think people are going to get this now.
Yeah. By the way, not to knock you, but you made me feel old when I realized how old some of your songs are. And I'm like, oh my God, that was like 13 years ago. Where am I in my life? I mean, because these are your stuff, and I'll stop asking questions. It's my last statement about your music. Your stuff has been in my playlist for so long, and it stays so fresh that
Really?
it doesn't feel
Nice of you.
old.
Feels old to me.
Well, you get to play it more than me. It's just fun to listen to. You're the one that has to work all the time with it.
I think you're right. I'm definitely tired of me, but I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. I'm glad that I have been some part of your life, and that these speak to you that way. That means a lot.
Well, look, and the next part of my life is going to be drinking American Highway Reserve. Obviously, that's
okay. Well,
that's so I'll have to keep you around a little bit longer, I guess, in my cultural in my American culture, man.
Please
so
do.
thanks for that. Yeah,
please do, definitely.
Wes, go for it.
How was COVID, Brad? I mean, it's a silly question. I mean, COVID was horrible for all of us, but as a family and being
That's
off
a really
the road,
good question.
Yeah,
it's complicated. It's like anybody. I mean, for some people it was hell. For others it was less so. And I mean, everybody struggled in some way. Unless you were Amazon, but Amazon or Zoom did very well. But for me, it was bittersweet. It was largely something that I will look back fondly on as far as the time period and what ended up happening. I remember I went through stages. The week of cancellation, the week where they took us off the road, and all of us were very naive, thinking, I remember calling my manager and agent and everybody and saying, what, 3-4 weeks? What are we looking at till we're back this summer, right? June. I mean, when it'll be summertime, we'll all be outside and it'll work, right? And they're like, yeah, sure. I mean, all of us thought, yeah, give it a little time. And then I would call some doctor friends of mine and they'd say, in their opinion, the best case scenario to normal is 3 years, maybe 5. And I'm like, how? And they're like, here's how. And they would explain it in a way that make your head spin. And sure enough, it kind of came about sort of like that. And at the time I remember thinking, how are we going to do this? I mean, my industry was hit as hard as any. There are people who will never recover in the country music industry. I was lucky in that I was able to keep the lights on a little bit, doing certain things. I didn't have to lay anybody off. Everybody kept their jobs. I'm very proud of that I didn't have to fire anybody due to COVID, And so by the time we were back on the road, like like Wes, when you came saw me last summer when we were back out, and the same group, same exact guys. And then I got all that time with my kids who were at the time when COVID started, 10 and 12, I think, or maybe 9 and 11 or something. I mean, it's like whatever age they were at that point, it has changed. I mean, I got those years, and especially that 2020 year with them, in a way, an intense year in the summer of being home. Like my day would be, I would wake up and go to the studio and do some work and record or do what I was going to do. And then I would decide like what I wanted to move with the bulldozer. And then what I wanted to do with the kids that day, and they were doing school on Zoom, and they were there all afternoon, and I would take them out and we'd go fishing or we'd do something. And I'll never regret that part. I mean, I've never spent as much time with them or ever will again. And it was right in that sweet spot before they get old enough they don't want to be with me anymore. So in that sense, I got through it.
What about creatively? Was that a time for you to spend any more time writing, or
Yeah,
was it mostly family?
No, it was creative. It was very creative. And what's interesting about it is I sit here right now having almost released nothing that I've done in that time period. And I've been in some ways more prolific and more active creatively than I've ever been, but I've yet to put anything out. And I've kind of sat on it for a little while, just waiting on the right time. And I think I'm almost there. There'll be some things coming here pretty soon. I was able to be very creative throughout it. I was lucky because I have access. What you see behind me is the couch in the studio, and what you can't see is the speakers and the studio room. Wes has been here, but it's like anything. It's I had access to it. I was able to come down here every day, and I made sure every day I did a little bit of writing or recording or whatever, and I figured out how to do it in isolation. So I'll look back pretty fondly on all that. Also, I did a lot of Zooms with people. I did a lot of popping in on nurses. Nurses would send a request saying, "Hey, we're working, burn the midnight oil, and we got a birthday for our head nurse, and we sure could use a shout out." I would hop in their Zoom and go, "How's it going?" and have a drinking party with them on a Friday afternoon after they'd been working the COVID ward all week. And some of those things too. I think I did 100 something Zooms in 2020 with people like that. And I'll never forget it. Just seeing the faces. I wanted to see who it was that was keeping us going, and say thanks if I could, if it mattered to them. There's a few of them I popped in and it didn't matter to them. But most of the time when I showed up, they were really happy.
So you popped into a Zoom for somebody and they were like, Brad Paisley, what are you doing here?
No,
All right.
Usually I was requested if I was there. I didn't just jump in. Like I'd get a request on Instagram or in a text message or something saying, it would mean a lot to these workers that are working at the grocery store up in upstate New York and trying to, they're all wearing masks and trying not to get sick. Meanwhile, everybody's still got to shop for groceries. We're having a business meeting. Would you jump in? Most of the time they were all really excited, but sometimes you would jump in and there'd be like a few people going, "Who's he?"
Back it up. Kim let you have a bulldozer? Is that what you said?
I've got a Kubota front loader. Yeah, it's pretty great.
Oh, wow.
I'm pretty good at it too.
How's that working out for you?
I got really good at it. It's working out great. There's nothing like putting a rock 20 feet away from where it began. Big rock you can't lift.
Well, yeah, when you say you're pretty good at it, does that mean there were a couple of accidents before you got good at it?
Yeah, there's a few times. I mean, anytime you start to work out how to work a big piece of heavy machinery, there's going to be the few moments where if you're lucky, you go, "Whoa, wait, that could have been bad." And you learn something. I had those, but I didn't do anything. It was all could have been bad, not necessarily was bad. I did get it stuck in the pond once, but it's fine. I got it out.
Oh, wow.
Well, what happens is I'm down there. It was actually not that one. It was a Caterpillar I had, but I was down there working with the front end loader that had tires, not tracks. I have one with tracks, but the one with the tires was down there on the water's edge, and I thought it had been dry enough, long enough, and I was moving something, and the side, one of the wheels. So if this is the wheel on two wheels, it went zoom and sank. about a foot into the ground sideways like that.
Next to the
So,
pond?
Next to the pond. So the wheel's down here, the water's here, but it got soft enough and there was nothing I could do. I mean, it was too much on its side to try and move it. So we had to take a winch and a bulldozer and pull it out with an actual D4 Caterpillar bulldozer out of there.
So was
those are things you learn.
Was your dad
In a
around when this
pandemic.
was your dad around when this was going on?
Yeah, he was part of that.
What would Doug have to say about that?
He saw it. He was very excited. He saw it as an opportunity to fix something that was broken. You know him. He springs to action. He's a firefighter.
Oh my gosh. And what a and by the way, how's your dad doing? And what a blessing to have. I still don't know exactly all the things that he does on the road with you.
I don't either, honestly, Wes. He doesn't get a paycheck, so I'm not sure. It's not like I have any itemized list of what it is.
But he seems very busy.
He's
He's the type, as you know, my dad is a busybody. He will be like, oh, that needs done, I'll do it. And that's pretty cool. I get a little of that from him, but not totally. But he's been good. I mean, he and my mom were very careful throughout the pandemic. And luckily, my mom is very immunocompromised. She has a condition. And so they had to be really safe for a while. And luckily, they got through the hard part of the pandemic without getting it seems like what it was in the beginning was way nastier than what it is now. So luckily, we avoided that.
And one of the things I've always enjoyed talking with your dad about is firefighting, and you've mentioned that a few times. And how was that growing up with him as a firefighter? Do you have memories of him running out the door in the middle of the night when the pager goes off? And right, small town fire department, right?
Yeah, 1,200 people, 1,500 people town in West Virginia. Only had a volunteer fire department. He was president of the fire department. He had scanners in every room. He had pagers. He had, it would be, you'd hear the siren and then he'd spring to action in the middle of the night. First one on the scene half the time. He lived for it. He would do fire school every couple of years. He would, it was really, for somebody, for a job that doesn't pay, it was pretty wild to see this group of guys that kept our town going. And that was the case. I mean, there was 20 guys in that fire department, all good people, all worked so hard towards keeping everything going. I mean, and there was so much involved. You know how small towns are. It wasn't just about fighting fires. They also were in charge of making sure we were represented in the parades locally. Those fire trucks were shined up and ready to go. They took care of an elderly widow who would fall in the middle of the night and put out brush fires. And I remember my dad doing the craziest of things. I mean, some pretty gruesome things he had to deal with as an EMT, and would jump to it. So it was pretty wild. It was neat growing up with that. And I grew up playing on the fire trucks at the fire station, just doing that my whole life.
Do you still look? I find myself, just as being a firefighter for so long, every time I hear a fire truck, I'm always looking. Just it's ingrained.
He gets way into it. I remember going to places like Myrtle Beach as a kid every year for vacation. That was our spot. And most of the state of West Virginia goes to Myrtle Beach, by the way. Probably half of Kentucky too, but we would go there and it was like all of us couldn't wait to play putt-putt and go to the beach and build sandcastles. And my dad's like, I saw a fire station over there. I kind of want to go see what trucks they got. He would go to the fire station and meet the guys on vacation to say, hey, I'm a firefighter. What's up? And it was hilarious. And I've gotten pictures. One of the radio DJs in Nashville is a volunteer fire department, works for a volunteer fire department here in Franklin. And he sends me pictures sometimes. He's like, look who's here. And it's my dad sitting around having lunch with them on an off day. So yes, he keeps himself busy, Wes, as you know.
Absolutely.
Well, Wes, I got to tell the story, man. Wes and I were headed to an interview. We were going to go hang out with some folks in Lexington. And we saw a car accident, and Wes was the first responder on the scene. We whipped around and he turned on his lights and threw his coroner's jacket on, which, by the way, if you're in a car accident, you see somebody in a coroner's jacket heading towards you. I don't know what you think mentally, but
no, that's not good. I wouldn't want to see that.
It's not, you're wondering if you're still there or not. But Wes, that's ingrained, folks who are first responders who really do believe in their communities and do stuff. I mean, like Wes doesn't have to do that. And
No,
he automatically, it wasn't even a thought. It's like, we got to go help those people.
that's tremendous. And yeah, you guys are cut from the same cloth, you and him, for sure. And I think this country shuts down without you in that way. And it's at least it's not a livable, pleasant place without you. So hats off to you guys. And
Much appreciated.
I grew up with that exact mentality. I mean, he'd be like, spring into action. Yeah. Again, pretty gruesome stuff too. I can remember some car wrecks where he's first on the scene, or, there was a woman that jumped in front of the train when I was growing up, and he was the first one on the scene for that. I mean, we're talking about, when you sign up for that, you're going to see some things.
Absolutely. Well, and you've always been really great about, I see that and it's ingrained in how you treat first responders. And I've seen you do benefits out in Montecito after the fires and the mudslides and everything like that. Wild. You did a show, and it was the most amazing thing. It was in a bar. I don't even remember the name of the bar, but here Brad Paisley showing up and doing a show for free for all the first responders in Montecito. And there was so much excitement. You were kind of popping up around town, tweeting.
That's
hey,
right.
I'm gonna
You were
be
there
here.
for that. That's right. Yeah,
I was. And that was really cool to do that. It really was.
Well, I think, it's like, I get a little of that from my dad. It's just that you don't want me suturing a wound, but I'll play the benefit when it's over to help raise money for the medical expenses. You just don't want me touching anything.
Yeah. I just think it's such a unique position for you to be in, to understand what those guys go through. And that's why you do so much charity work. And we won't totally focus on it, but I know, and I think anybody who knows of you knows all the things that you've done, and even the little drop-ins and things. It's really important to so many people, and it really touches.
I hope so. Well, it definitely made me feel less during the pandemic, especially. I felt way less helpless, to be able to do our charity and also do those Zooms and things. I think I'd have gone nuts if it was just me on a bulldozer and not really interacting and making a difference. That's a pretty easy recipe to find yourself pretty depressed. It's hard to stay down when you're trying to cheer someone else up. That's one thing I've always been told.
Was a lot of that worked into, and I told you I'd never ask another music question here, but the No I and Beer video was
that was exactly the idea for that. Was that whole song and treatment of that was all about, just kind of felt like where we all were at that moment. It all stemmed from when Peyton Manning reached out to me on a Saturday early on in the pandemic. I had just gotten Zoom on my phone, and he said, "Do you have Zoom?" And I said, he calls me on a Saturday night. And he says, "Do you have Zoom?" And I said, "Yeah, I just did one." He's like, "Okay, click on this link." And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Just do it." So I did. And it was him and me and then a bunch of football players that had gone to University of Tennessee. And they were having a competition to see who they could get in their Rolodex that was famous to join in on this Zoom. And they ended up with 100 people on this Zoom. Kevin Hart was on there, and he's like, "Brad, you got to get somebody." So I had Darius call in, and he came in on Zoom, and then Dan Patrick showed up. It was nuts. It was like, the next thing you know, we're all sitting around and you're seeing everybody in their den of sorts drinking something. Like, everybody had something they were drinking, and I ended up down at my bar and just having the craziest and they taped it all for UT as a charity thing. And it was like this, see who can outdo who with a famous ask. And that's when I kind of was like, oh, this is a brave new world we've entered into here. Long before this pandemic, everything had to be in person. I mean, you wouldn't even think about, this podcast would have been, I think, Wes, you'd have been like, "Hey, when can you come to Louisville?"
Yeah.
Here we are now doing it like this. It's amazing. And for that's one of the good things that came about. I think for a lot of us, there's a few less trips into the office, which is not going to be a bad thing.
I didn't think I would like it at the beginning, and it just took getting used to. And I did a lot of Zoom tastings with consumers and birthday greetings, similar to kind of what you were doing. I ended up actually really enjoying it,
Yeah,
because
me
I could touch more people. We could, we didn't have to travel to get beat up by travel, and now I enjoy it. I did miss a lot of the face-to-face contact, but now I think what it's forced us to do is that we make choices about what's really important. Is it important for me to spend time flying here or going here when I can have a meaningful interaction like we're having now?
Yeah.
And that time I've saved by getting somewhere, I can
Yep.
do something else in my life,
That
be it
trade-off,
family.
is a big thing. I mean, there was a week where while we were promoting the song No Iron Beer, and I was also in the middle of doing all these things, as well as we were working on trying to get the word out on our charity in Nashville, where I did Seth Meyers, Good Morning America, The Tonight Show. There was like a 2-week period, all of the news networks, The Talk, maybe The View. Anyway, all of those were done in this room. Whereas any other launch or any other sort of like album tour or anything I do media wise, I would have to fly to New York, and you'd do 2 days in New York, and you would have to get up at 6 a.m. and go in and do The View. And then you do Kelly Ripa's show, or you do you do ABC, Good Morning America. And then you would maybe wait around and do the Tonight Show. And then you would go and have also like a California thing where you would do Ellen's show. And I mean, it was crazy. Like all of these things were done. Like I had basically all these different outfits, and I would stand in that corner over there and perform the song for the Seth Meyers show. Then I would go into the vocal booth and do an acoustic version for the talk. And then I would go downstairs into like the bar and sing it for like Seth, or for I don't know, Tonight Show, one of them. Like they all had different settings, and I would just change my shirt, and half of those I did in one day, and they aired different times. And the idea of that, I think, opened all of our minds that it's like the point is reaching people, and it doesn't always have to be perfect. We threw perfect out the window that third week of March. That was it. That was like March 2020. It was like, yeah, never mind. Forget it. I don't even need a haircut. Just let's go. I didn't put pants on the rest of the year.
That was a plus for a lot of us that don't like to wear pants. It was a great,
It was.
When you mentioned the charity in Nashville, are you talking about the store?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, which is a project that you and Kim kind of started together in partnership with Belmont University, which is an amazing concept. Can you share a little bit about that and how that's going? And it seems like such an impactful thing you were doing in Nashville, and talk about taking it other places too, I think, as well.
Yeah, we are. I mean, we had been working for 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, on this concept. And got a board of directors together and got on board with Belmont, and had already purchased the land and broke ground, and were ready to build the building. And the building was completed. The project was ready. The funding was in place. And we launched the last week of February, first week of March of 2020. And the concept is it's a grocery store where if you lose your job or you are falling on hard times and you qualify, it's very easy to qualify. Basically, you qualify by not having means to feed your family. You just come in and shop, and it feels very, very normal. It's a grocery store, but if you're part of the program, it's free, and it's free for anybody that shops there. So you get an allotment of fruits, vegetables, food, dry goods, things that you need. And it's got everything a grocery store has. And then the dignity that comes from being able to pick out your fruit, your vegetables, what you get, cereal, milk, whatever it is you want to feed your family. Your family, you could be in there with your kids, and your kids will just think you're at the store, because that's what it is. And there's a lot of dignity and choice. A lot of charities that spring up are all about feeding people, but people have no choice about what that is. And in our case, it's all about you're in control, even though this is a charity. And so we launched in the pandemic, and very quickly had more need than ever expected, and also no way to have them come in and shop. So we came up with this whole delivery program and delivered over 1 million meals in the first year.
Wow.
We're now at 2 million meals served, and pretty crazy to have been able to do that. If you'd have said to us in the beginning, don't worry, you're going to feed 1 million meals, I'd have said, there's no way we can't do 300,000. But when you have to, you find a way. And we did, and it got us off the ground. And I think launching when we did changed everything.
Yeah. Wow. Listen, I don't want to take it from Sirius back to bourbon, but I'm going to do it. How much did this product influence your product? I know you're friends with Peyton Manning. Obviously you're in his Rolodex. What do you think about it? And did his involvement kind of help influence yours as well? Or you?
No, I can honestly say that Peyton had as much say over my bourbon as he does over my music, which is to say that in his mind, he's responsible for my bourbon and my records. But in reality, it might be a little different. No, I think that's a great product, though. I'm so proud of him for doing that. But ironically, we both kind of were launching around the same time. But yeah, he knows what he's doing, that guy. And everything he does, everything he touches, he becomes an expert on. So he's a great partner in so many ways. We have a great time when we do these things together.
How much of those commercials are, I know they're scripted to a certain extent, but it seems like there's a lot of ad-libbing going on there, or
yeah,
there's such a free flow.
I think the best ones are the ad-libbed ones, and some of those are the ones that do the best. They're really good at writing us good scripts, though. But there's a few where we'll be goofing around with, he'll tell me you'll see a thing where he'll say, sing this, and I'll try it. And it's just funny when we riff. And he is a naturally funny, he is the example of how you make the most out of a football retirement. I've never seen anything like it. Really, really quite the entrepreneur and quite the comedian too.
Yeah. Wes, do you have any more questions?
Well, I know we've taken up a lot of time. I do want to ask, what's Kim up to these days? Can we bring her into the conversation a little bit? And
she's doing great. She's Kim is she's just finished a couple of movies that are going to come out. One's on Netflix and another is, where's the other one going to be? I don't know. She was gone at one point. She claimed she was doing a movie. I don't know. She was away for a month, off and on. She's doing great. I mean, we've both come through this time period with a new appreciation for one another. I think for spouses, the pandemic was a true test of whether you belong together. And I think we figured out we do. But boy, some people I know figured out they don't. And we did great.
And I agree completely. And I see a lot of similarities between Kim and Julie, and just they've got this kind of steadiness and this way about themselves of, and those relationships that don't have these extreme highs and lows, that are more like partnerships and friendships. And I think those are the types of relationships that seem to have fared well during the pandemic. And
you got to like the person, especially when you're together. Like when they sent us all home from the office to some degree, you got to like the person. You're going to be together a lot, and we're lucky. We have a farm. So I've got this studio that I can hide in, and she's got her she shack up by there. We call it this little house we built that she's got. That's kind of an office. And, we've made the most of it. We would sort of separate and make sure we had projects to work on and then get together in the evening like normal. I think if you were stuck in a New York apartment, it was rough, I bet.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, Tim, do you have anything else? We kept Brad on the phone here for a minute. Anything else you can think of that we didn't?
You know what? I just want to know what the conversation was when you said to your wife, "Hey, I got a bulldozer," and she's like, "Why?" And you're like, "Because I want to move stuff."
Well, I've had one up for many, many years, long before the pandemic. But the reason I bought that was I didn't like the quote on landscaping when we first built our house. It was too much. The guy saw me coming. He was a big fan. And I was like, so how much for if you put in an irrigation system and then I do the rest. And he's like, that'd be this much. I'm like, okay, cool, do that. And I bought a bulldozer, or I bought a skid steer instead, and moved the rocks I wanted around our house and put in trees, and they're all still alive. The trees are alive. The rocks are alive.
Huh?
So, didn't kill anything as far as I know, except a copperhead once. So it was, it was good. It went well. And I like it. I think it's, again, for the pandemic, it was like, this place has never looked better. That's all I did, was make sure that the rocks and trees and things were where I wanted them to be.
Okay, so the last question, and we got to end on this American Highway Reserve. You mentioned 13, 15-year juice going into the back of that truck. Are we going to see some unicorns from you that I'm going to have to go hunt down for a bunch of money?
I think so eventually, especially in the sense that that first batch that went down the road, some of that, we kept several barrels back and didn't blend them. And then they went on the second voyage again, second trip on that tour. And then kept them again. And then there's going to be like, and imagine that 4-year-old stuff that went the first time goes down the road every, like, well, at some point we're going to need to try it. You could do 1 barrel of something that's gone on 5 tours, which would be like over, I bet that'd be 1 million miles or something. I mean, what would it even be? I mean, I gotta add up what the mileage was that first, but it hit most of the 48 states, you know?
Yeah.
And so you can imagine that in itself, if that's worthy, we might try it and go, nope. But if it's great, I could see that being something you want to try, something that went way down, you know, that 1 barrel of, like, went on every voyage, world traveler. I don't know what you'd call it.
I think that'll be fun. I look forward to that. And we do need to revisit the probes thing and all those things to watch those barrels. I think that'd be fun to see them, you know, analytically start to see those changes and everything like that. That's valuable information for the entire industry. Not only is it great for the story of American Highway, that's teaching us things in the industry, which is really cool. And, you know, it'd be fun. So
I'd love to. Let's work on that.
I'm excited to see what's going to happen next. And thanks so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, Wes, you've been a good friend so many years, and we've done a lot of fun things and good things together, and there's more to come. And especially now that you are probably going to be sitting around the house, nothing to do, driving your wife nuts.
I will. I'm going to see Brad. I'm
come on down.
I'm going to see Brad.
You know what the price of admission is?
I know. I'm good.
I want some bottles with little handwritten labels on them.
I got plenty of those, man.
That says, this is something no one's had yet.
There you go. Try this and see. We're going to be a guinea pig for us. If you survive it, we might release it. That's right. I'll look at it.
A real tough life. Shall I do the wrap up, Wes?
Go ahead. Thanks, Brad.
Right.
I've loved it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for hanging out. Brad Paisley, Wes Henderson. I'm Tim Young. LetsDrinkBourbon.com, at LetsDrinkBourbon on Instagram, and all of the places that you can find a podcast. Go ahead, download it, like it, leave a comment if you like it, and tell your friends about it. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.